Rune of the Apprentice by Jamison Stone. Read by Paul Inman, author of Ageless and co-author of Motor City Chronicles, Book 1, Transgressions. Ageless is in production by Inkshares Publishing and for pre-order on inkshares.com. Motor City Chronicles, Book 1, Transgressions, is also available for pre-order on inkshares.com. Prologue. There are moments in the history of people and planets when myth, legend, and inescapable destiny rule. Such times are bound by prophecy and once begun are impossible to halt, for the fates of all, unknowingly intertwined, move toward a numinous end that will not be denied. It was on such a night that destiny stirred once again on the planet of Terra. Hanging in the starry sky like great watching eyes, Terra's 2 moons shone with a silvery blue light which radiated from deep within their cores. Far below, on Terra's surface, the orbs cast a soft glow into a small wooded clearing nestled into the sides of the great mountain of Devdin's zenith. Illuminated from above, the glade's thick pines swayed gently in the night's wind. Whispering through the branches and soft grasses, the breeze circled around a solitary man. Seated alone among the trees, the dark robes which hung from his shoulders ruffled in the breeze. Growing stronger, a gust then pushed back his long hair, causing it to shine like black gossamer in the shafts of silver moonlight which fell through the shadowed canopy overhead. Behind the man, the monolithic citadel of the Master's Academy rose proudly from the side of the colossal mountain. Like always, the Academy's sanctified towers were ablaze, tirelessly casting back the darkness of the night. Looming above the spires, the mountain's sharp and snowy zenith reflected the light of the moons, caressing the heavens much as a lover would. With his back facing the Academy and his hair strewn about him, the man sat nobly in the grass. His legs were crossed and his feet rested on opposite knees. As the breeze blew across his face and cupped his hands as if clutching an invisible sphere, the man then silently mouthed an ancient invocation, and his hands began to shake in the darkness. He intoned the runic language of Numen, an occult burden that few in Terra knew the weight of. A translucent light began to appear, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. It grew slowly within the space between his palms. Forming itself into a small ball, the glow shone out through his fingers and cast long shadows against the grass. As the light grew stronger, intricately flowing runes began to coalesce on the ball's surface. The cryptic glyphs danced across the sphere in a scrolling line, detailing the orb's power and purpose. With his runic casting complete, the man lowered his hands and let out a great sigh. The runic ball expanded, swirling like incandescent water. It cast an eerie glow within the clearing. As the sphere grew to a diameter of nearly 2 meters, the man felt its edges flow over his robed body like shimmering quicksilver. After it fully enclosed him, the runes on the orb's outer surface began to shine out with a new multicolored ferocity. The man suddenly felt himself grow buoyant as he was lifted several centimeters off the grassy ground. As the sphere's exterior took solid form, the outside world was completely blocked from view. The man was then gently lowered onto the orb's smooth, rounded inner surface. The man's long hair shone dimly in the faint light of the sphere's inner walls. He bowed his head and took a long, apprehensive inhalation. Upon his face was a look of uneasiness, and his shoulders were tensed in anticipation of the conversation to come. Exhaling slowly, he forced his body to relax. Raising his palms to the curved walls, the man focused his mind and once again mouthed a silent command. With a sudden flash, the interior of the sphere sprang to life, revealing a full 360-degree panorama of a small stone room with a low burning fire. Many kilometers away, on Terra's northern continent of Sim, a large muscular man of dark presence and ominous airs sat alone in a stone room. Lit by a tepid fire, the room had a thin rug and only a single wooden door. The door was bolted shut. The large man wore a cloak accented with deep greens which matched the bright emeralds of his eyes. Tailored in the style of the North, his clothes were intricately embroidered with the designs of the noble aristocracy. Upon both hands and forearms, however, he wore ornately crafted gauntlets of a much more sinister style and origin. The large man sat on a low cushion with his eyes half closed until a glimmer of light arose before him. His eyes perked up as a projection of a robed man with long dark hair slowly took form in the barren room. Imbued with a translucent runic glow, the man's illuminated visage cast faint shadows in the dim room. The long-haired man's projection pressed his hands together before his heart and bowed his head low. The light of the fire seemed to pass through his luminescent body and eerily dance across the room's stone floor and walls. "The hour grows late, Nataraja," the muscular man said softly, not returning the bow. His voice was a deep rumble, akin to a massive boulder slowly rolling forward, knowing nothing could stop its inevitable movement. "I apologize, Lord Asura," Nataraja answered. "Getting away from the academy was difficult tonight." "You know that was not my meaning." "Alexei has proven challenging to shift, Master," Nataraja continued, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Lord, I need more time. Please, just grant me—" Asura raised an armored fist, causing Nataraja's words to be cut short. Blue fire raced across Asura's gauntleted arm and flowed into his hand. Passed down from an age long forgotten, no one else in known history had dared awaken a runic tool of such dark danger and ominous power. "What difference does a drop of time make?" Asura asked roughly. The smoky blue light in his fist then fractured, and pristine white sand began to seep through his mailed fingers. "Lord, it does not have to be this way." Nataraja strained to keep his voice controlled as he watched the grains fall to the floor. "Alexei will turn. I am so very close." "After Rudra abandoned the boy, you had 5 years to complete your mission. Yet Alexei's rune is now beginning to awaken, and I refuse to allow his power to go unchecked, lest he seek out Rudra and aid his so-called resistance." "My lord, You have failed!" Asura boomed, wiping the last of the sand from his palms. "I wanted him, but your charade as Alexei's master ends tonight. Go now and collect your things. Your time in the East is done." A look of confusion passed over Nataraja's face. "Lord, Alexei is still just a youth and has so much potential. I beg you." Before Nataraja could utter another word, Asura clapped his hands. A wave of concussive energy swept through the room, striking Nataraja's projection in the chest and causing it to momentarily blur. When Nataraja spoke again, there was desperation in his tone. "Master, please, do not command me to kill the boy!" "No need," Asura answered coldly. "I have sent a shadow to deal with him. I assume you know which one. A fitting end for youth, don't you agree?" Anger flashed across Nataraja's face, but he quickly regained his composure. "Always remember," Asura continued, eyeing Nataraja carefully, "it is your failure that has killed Alexei. Although this boy's blood does not warm your blade, just like the last one, it will forever stain your hands. Fury shone in Nataraja's eyes as his projected image began to disintegrate into bits of light, which sheared off into nothingness. I will know you by your actions, Nataraja, Asura said, as he once again tightened his gauntleted fist. Choose your path carefully. Back in the wooded clearing on the eastern zenith, the runic sphere once again returned to flowing light. After disintegrating and dispersing into the shadows, Nataraja was left alone in the darkness among the wind, trees, and grass. No, not like Lavale, Nataraja whispered bitterly as a ripple of anger moved across his face. Not Alexei too. Nataraja was then on his feet and running. His long hair flowed behind him as he sprinted in the darkness. Faster than any normal man should be able to move, his body became like a flicker of light as he raced toward the massive citadel that protruded from the great mountainside above. Soon, Nataraja came to the 4 gates of the Master's Academy. 2 guards stood facing the night. Each held guttering torches, which cast a halo of warmth into the cool evening mist. Without stopping, Nataraja swept past them in a flash. As he did, one of the guards called out, Master, is everything? Nataraja paid the man no heed, and flew across the stable yard and up a back stairway which led to the students' sleeping halls. He then raced up a winding flight of stone stairs and came within sight of Alexei's door. Without losing speed, Nataraja raised a hand. The air rippled around his outstretched arm, and the wooden door silently imploded, ripping off its thick metal hinges. Bursting into the darkness, Nataraja held out both palms and whispered under his breath. Answering his command, the wall lamps ignited, burning bright and hot in the small room. Now illuminated, Nataraja could see that the chamber was bare. Before him was a writing desk devoid of papers, an empty closet, and a wooden chest at the foot of the neatly made bed. The room's only window stood open. Outside, there was a clear view of the moons shining down on the large island of Adhira, just off the coast. Nataraja's long black hair shone in the lamplight. Nataraja was in his mid-years, and when seen in profile, women still thought him tempting. But upon looking into his hardened green eyes and seeing their fierce stare, any thought of seduction evaporated. That very gaze now swept the room with the unimaginable glare of violence. He scanned the chamber. Nataraja noticed that the only thing out of place in the boys' quarters was its very emptiness. Alexei was gone, and yet there was no lingering smell of death. A sudden breeze rose up through the open window, and Nataraja turned sharply as if listening to a faraway sound. Dropping into a defensive stance, he extended one hand out in front of his chest, and a luminescent blue barrier emanated from his palm. Abruptly, a whirl of wind rose up from the night, and a throwing knife fell in through the open window. It ricocheted off Nataraja's blue shield, struck the wall, and fell to the wooden floor with a metallic clang. The room's lamps were then extinguished, and the chamber was plunged back into shadow. Nataraja had disappeared. A thick darkness silently began to seep in through the window. This darkness did not belong to Nataraja, yet he knew it well. It belonged to Nivane, his stepson and former apprentice. Pooling over the floorboards, the darkness settled into the room's corners and smothered all sound. Shrouding the chamber like black silk, it even drowned out the light of the moons. To most, this depth of gloom brought a terror which seemed to suck the very life out of all it touched. Nataraja, however, was not impressed. After a moment, a cloaked figure glided in from the window, covered in a wispy mantle of blackness. Navain floated toward the center of the room with dark tendrils circling each silent step. In a startling flash, the cloaked figure then spun and threw 3 more daggers into the shadowed depths where Nataraja hid. The daggers, however, pierced the inky dark only to be buried in the wall with a loud thunk. Suddenly, the torches flared, viciously burning away the black. Navain shielded his light-sensitive eyes in anguish. Nataraja then loomed up behind the young man, seeming to materialize out of the room's thinning darkness. Before Navain could turn, Nataraja slammed his fist into the young man's lower back, breaking his spine with an audible crack. Navain's mouth contorted in a soundless scream as his legs collapsed beneath him. Hitting the ground, the young man struggled to move, but his lower body was now numb. Flipping Navain onto his back, Nataraja then took 2 dark daggers from the young man's belt and plunged them, one at a time, into Navain's hands, pinning him to the floor. "Is this how you killed your brother Lavale?" Nataraja asked in a voice that was cold and controlled. "And now you plan to do the same to Alexei?" "Master Nataraja," but before Navain could say any more, his mouth grew slack and his eyes rolled back into their sockets. As his stepson slipped out of consciousness, Nataraja placed a hand on the young man's chest. Soft blue light emanated from Nataraja's palm, and Navain's body convulsed as his eyes wildly snapped back open. "My little shadow," Nataraja continued, "if you ever wish to walk again, you will answer my questions quickly. You do not have much time." Nataraja's tone was tight, but his green eyes were alive with fury. "So, I ask you again, is this how you killed your brother Lavale?" "Master, please forgive me!" Fear rang in Navain's voice as he futilely struggled against the daggers pinning him to the floor. "All I have done has been under the direct order of the High Master Asura. I swear it!" "So it was you that killed Lavale." Nataraja bared his teeth, and his face filled with rage. Nataraja took another knife from Navain's leather belt. The blade seemed to carnivorously swallow the light from the lamps. Seeing this, the young man's green eyes grew even wider. "After all I have taught you, you dare repay my love by not just murdering my son, but now my apprentice too? Navain, I don't care if High Archai Kaisra commanded you to commit such an act. You are a fool to obey." Nataraja violently plunged the dagger into Navain's gut. The young man gritted his jaw and grunted as Nataraja slowly began twisting the blade. Blood seeped through Navain's cloak as his torn flesh glistened in the hot lamplight. "I have one last question for you, my fallen apprentice," Nataraja said as he calmly continued to twist the dagger. "Did you come here alone, or are there others? Speak quickly, or I will let you die." "Father!" Navain cried in anguish as the blade continued to gouge his stomach. "Please have mercy! Please!" "You are no son of mine!" Nataraja yelled, digging the dagger deeper into his stepson's flesh. "Answer my question!" I am alone. I swear it on Mother's grave." Nataraja lowered his head and let go of the dagger. "Please," Navain whispered with a soft desperation in his tone. "I can feel it. I can feel death taking me. Father, I beg you, don't let me die. I was only following our Lord's orders. Both times." After a long moment, Nataraja let out a great sigh and placed his right hand over the young man's blood-soaked torso. A look of relief flooded across Navain's pale face. "Thank you, Father." "Only following orders," Nataraja whispered. "Oh, Navain, that was my greatest folly, and for your sake, I am so very sorry." Confusion crept into Navain's green eyes. "Sleep well, my little shadow," Nataraja continued sadly, "knowing that you have blindly served your Lord's will." Navain's eyes widened as Nataraja's hand began to glow red. I, however, will never make that mistake again. A look of horror swept across Navain's face as his body began emitting immense heat and light. "No, Master!" Navain sputtered as fire and pain flooded through his chest. "Asura will know of your betrayal!" "And by then," Nataraja whispered, "it will not matter." Letting out a soundless scream, an internal fire raged inside the young man, burning out his insides. "I send your soul back to High Archai Kaisra," Nataraja continued softly, as a silent tear ran down his cheek. "May he show you the forgiveness I never could." Terra's 2 moons still hung brightly in the starry sky. They had moved a great distance, however, and now shone through the room's open window in a glorious shaft of silver brilliance. Slumped on the floor, Navain's lifeless body was framed in the elegant light. Idly staring up at the ceiling, his dull eyes reflected the moon's soft glow. The cinders that were crusted around the gaping hole of the young man's charred chest cavity were now cold, but despite the open window, the scent of burnt flesh still enveloped the room. "Kyla! My love!" Nataraja said roughly, with emotion thick in his voice. "Please!" The master sat some distance away, on the bed. He held his head in calloused and tear-stained hands. "Please forgive me!" After several long moments, Nataraja raised his head and brushed away strands of damp hair. Turning to look out the window with raw eyes, he gazed down to the twinkling island of Adhira and Terra's great ocean beyond. "Go fast, young Alexei," Nataraja whispered. "You're not ready for what follows, nor for what you will find." Huddled on the deck of a small sailing ship, Alexei watched the dawn of a new day break over the eastern zenith. The ship sailed west across the wide channel to the large island of Adhira. Casting his gaze up to the mountain's great peak, Alexei knew he would not be able to see the Master's Academy. Despite this, his heart still longed for one last glimpse of its majestic towers. The one-masted vessel was bound for Mindra's Haven, the most renowned city in the eastern realm of Devdan. Mindra's Haven, however, was not Alexei's final destination, for in Mindra's Haven he hoped to find passage halfway across Terra's great ocean to the war-torn central continent of Vaikel. After Alexei arrived in Vaikel, the youth knew not where fate would take him. The morning's damp breeze was piercingly cold. Instead of being illuminated by a sun, Terra's daylight was a gift of the Archai, and shone down from the zenith of each continent's sacred mountain. As Alexei watched the eastern zenith's globe give off its first glimmering rays of light in the dark sky, he wrapped his sleeveless cloak tightly around himself. Other than a few low-denomination black pearls of currency, Alexei had only the clothes on his back, the sword at his hip, and a frayed letter from Master Rudra in his pocket. Alexei slipped his hand into his cloak and felt the message's weathered parchment. It was smooth to his touch, worn from several long nights of pondering its occult meaning. Is Rudra truly worth abandoning Nataraja and my tutelage at the Master's Academy? Worth risking my life in defying the Master's law? Anxiety spread across Alexei's face, and he looked down at his right hand. It was covered in a clean, white bandage. The youth focused his mind and felt the skin of his palm pulse with numinous power. Taking a deep breath, Alexei looked back up at the towering mountain of the eastern zenith. Yes. Huddling on the ship's damp planks, Alexei gripped his master's letter one last time before wrapping the hooded cloak around himself even tighter. No matter the risk, Alexei would follow the cryptic path of this ominous letter. Now known only as Terra's Bane, Rudra was a forsaken man hunted the world over. Yet, if the letter was accurate, Rudra was also Alexi's only hope of survival. You've been listening to the prologue for Rune of the Apprentice by Jamison Stone, read by Paul Inman, author of Ageless and co-author of the Motor City Chronicles, Book 1, Transgressions. If you like what you've heard here, please visit inkshares.com and pre-order Rune of the Apprentice.